Hello and welcome to the CNBC-TV18 special. I'm Shireen Bhan. We've been here covering the story in Davos for the past week. The mood, as I pointed out, when it comes to the global economy is uncertain. But when it comes to India, the Davos consensus is clear that India is a bright spot at this point in time. It is a compelling story, one that investors who are already invested are looking at much more closely, and investors who are not yet invested are also assessing and reviewing more closely. Well, joining me now for the Davos takeaways from the 53rd annual meeting of the World Economic Forum, Minister Smriti Irani, Sanjiv Bajaj, Hari S Bhartia and Chandrajit Banerjee representing the Confederation of Indian Industry. My very first question to you, I will get to the industry in just a second, but I want to start by asking you, this is your first Davos, your first as a minister. Yes, you were here as a young global leader, but in your assessment, on the back of the meetings that you've had, on the back of the bilaterals that you've had, what is the message that people have taken away from the India story, the message that you wanted them to take away?
I think that the fact that we can have systemic reform, and it's not a one-time process, that we will continue to engage with businesses, look at their needs, and then recognize that businesses and technologies evolve and hence need an engagement with governance and local industry to such an extent that problems are met with solutions with alacrity, because many are business systems for them to indigenize themselves to the local environment from a manufacturing, a labor and a skill set point of view will take a combined effort between local industry, international investors and government at the center and at the state, including local governance bodies at the local level where businesses are set up. The second and the most profound takeaway has been that there has been a recognition of the pandemic-led need to innovate, do so frugally, deploy solutions at large scale like we did, and the fact, and what for me is a matter of great pride, but I say this with a sense of humility, that investor after investor has said that we were challenged. We were challenged from a supply chain point of view. We were challenged from a pharmacological solution point of view. We were challenged by the fact that movement had been completely stopped. And in such a time of challenge, it is India that walked up with solutions that were viable, that were sustainable, and that were for the greater good. I think that what speaks volumes about the Indian capacity is not only the capacity of our manufacturing talent to repurpose itself to new avenues of manufacturing. What is also, I think, makes me extremely buoyant about my engagements is the fact that people recognize that supply chains in our country will never be choked for strategies which are geopolitically I think leveraged by many countries. I think that is a great story to tell of commerce with compassion.
Commerce with compassion. Sanjiv Bajaj, let me come to you now. You know, as I said, climate, green energy, China +1, these have all been themes that have played out here in Davos. But there has been a sharp focus on the India story, on the resilience of the Indian economy, on the need for the Indian economy to integrate with the world and what the opportunities therein lie. On the back of the conversations that you've had with your peers, with global investors, what's different this time around?
See, before we talk about the economy, there are certain common global challenges, and you mentioned some of them. So, one on the economy, balancing inflation with interest rate, or balancing public debt with growth and investment. Infectious diseases and anticipating the next pandemic, and of course everything around climate change, the challenge but also the opportunity that it offers. These are areas where India can play a significant role in the global economy, in innovation in a number of these new areas. What stands out starkly in our discussions is that the Western world is going to go through some level of recession. How deep versus mild can be discussed, but markets like India are standing out with much higher rates of growth. And that's why, whether it is because of that growth rate, a large domestic consumption market, or whether it's friend sourcing or +1 or only one, whatever that strategy be, but you can hear India is on people's mind. You can see that. We now have to convert this promise into reality.
Well, talking about converting that promise into reality and what that's going to actually mean in terms of fresh investment coming in, Hari Bhartia, your take on that. it's a compelling story from a growth perspective. It's a compelling story from a domestic market perspective. It's a compelling story from a consumption perspective. Who better than you? You've got Domino's pizzas flying out of your stores at this point in time to take us through what the sentiment and the mood is. Give me a pulse check.
Before that, I just wanted to say that we had two disruptions. First was COVID, and second was the Ukraine war. During the COVID, I think we all developed a muscle to deal with disruption. So as you rightly said, and what Sanjiv said, India is a bright spot. We are going to grow at 7%. But I also saw one more thing here. That when I came here, the FT had a story that the world is going into deep recession, especially about Europe and US.
Yeah.
But I don't think that is going to happen. I don't see a sign of deep recession. Somehow the economies have managed. And the biggest opportunity that I see is they are trying to build a resilient supply chain. Now, I'm not going to say that any decoupling will happen with a major country, because I think interdependence is quite a bit. But one thing that everybody wants before next disruption happens is to build a resilient supply chain. And for that, I think huge conversations. India is top of the mind. Everybody knows India is a large consuming nation. So double advantage. You build a resilient supply chain, as Smriti ji said, unaffected by any political issues. And you get a big market. So I think we saw India top of the mind everywhere. 2006, we talked about India everywhere. Shireen, you would remember that.
Yes.
So India is everywhere this time.
And quite literally so. If you walk down this road, it is quite literally everywhere. But Chandrajit Banerjee, on the issue of the supply chain diversification, at this point in time, let's be honest, there is competition. There's competition coming in from Vietnam, from Indonesia, from other countries as well. One of the factors that plays to the advantage of some of these other Southeast Asian economies is the logistics costs. We have, of course, tried to put that in focus through the logistics policy, etc., but that's yet to play out. What are the factors that we need to focus on to ensure that we can get a larger share of this diversification?
So, in the discussions that you've seen in Davos, much of the points were covered, but one story of India, which relates to the question that you are asking, is the presence of India. If you see, you see India present and you see the states of India present, and the truth and the next level of story of India would come from the states of India. There are 29 mini Indias competing. And that's a very healthy competition. And I think that's where we will need to see business facilitation. I think this consciousness and the appetite to get capital and to be more competitive, to become business friendly, is sincerely seen across many states of India. And I think that's going to be a very, very, after the central level reforms have been done to an extent, we are seeing state level reforms which really facilitates capital to come in. Second, logistics will also, if you really look at the focus on infrastructure, the state level, capex, so to say, that needs to be, loosened a bit, and we need to see more of that happening. So with the central capex, state capex coming in, would definitely strengthen infrastructure and give more gati to gati shakti, and I think that's going to be critical, and that's going to be a very, very critical answer to the question that you asked.
Yes, and we have seen gati shakti get some gati, so we're hoping that it will now fast track. But Minister Irani, what I want to pick up on is the point that was being made there by Chandrajit Banerjee, that the strength of India also lies in the strength of its states. Now, how do we ensure that there is greater alignment between the centre and the states to ensure that we deliver on the promise and the potential that investors hope for?
So while Mr. Banerjee was kind enough to reflect on the diversity of investment opportunities that India presented at Davos with the government of India and its various interventions here, including the space in which we speak right now, also the fact that states have come up here themselves to speak about their potential to leverage investment for the greater good, one needs to recognize, and I've said this in a conversation with you before, that why do we need a collective action, and irrespective of our competitions domestically need to give the signal that this is a collaboration no matter how competitive we are, is because if any small story of failure emanates, it will not be designated to one state, one entity, one organization, or one business. It will be marked, or it will be frameworked as an India story that did not work. And that is what I think necessitates the collaboration that Mr. Banerjee is reflecting on. One of the greatest examples, and he spoke about Gati Shakti, giving Gati. For some, it is just a framework for the government to look at infrastructure building from a public asset building point of view. But how do you build public assets? You build it out of the taxpayers' money. How do you reduce the cost of building that infrastructure so that there is more money left for other activities by the government, or for that matter, there's more money left for maybe expanding manufacturing capacities at the base level of the SMEs? How do you give more money there? Gati Shakti is not only a logistical intervention, it is also an intervention that makes building of public assets more economical. Because there are many disruptions and cost of money goes up when you build public infrastructure. Now, on not the back of Gati Shakti, but preceding it was the Prime Minister's intervention of doing Pragati, which is what the Prime Minister of India, and this does not happen in any other democracy in the world, which has a federal structure, sits every month with chief secretaries and secretaries across all governments in the country, and ensures that if there's any infrastructure project, especially out of the taxpayers' money that has been lagging behind for too long, there is a collaboration between center and state to say, tell us where it is getting choked. And tell us how can we help. Let's use not only a collaboration in governance, but also let's leverage space technology and see how can we get things done. How can we minimize paperwork? And I think that is a template which manifests as a work ethic.
Sanjiv Bajaj, put down the wish list now. Minister Irani said that a lot of the reforms, or every reform that industry has asked for, has been delivered. I'm sure industry has more on its list that it would like the government to do. What would be the top 3 items at this point in time? We've also got a big budget coming up. The top 3 items that you would like the government to focus on?
Well, it's going to be an important budget, clearly, right? Because next year we go into election year. We are still in a very uncertain global world. So I would say continued public investment in infrastructure, hopefully raise it again by another 35%, take it to 10 lakh crore this year. That has provided the wings to India's economy the last few years. We need to recognize that. Second is recognize the fact that through the last few years, those at the lower end of our income segment have got hurt the most. Inflation pinches them the most. Can we rationalize personal income taxes at that level, give them a little bit more money? It helps us churn the economy as well, get more growth going. So that would be the second ask. And third, I would just say that ease of doing business, government has been introducing a number of policies, but you need to keep moving ahead. So keep making India a better, more efficient place for business to prosper.
Is the government considering the possibility, and there's a lot of speculation on this, of taxing the rich more in order to be able to fund the 2 aspects that Sanjiv Bajaj just raised?
I need to credit you, Shireen. Who else but Shireen Bhan would look for the announcement of the Indian budget but at Davos? I will just say this, that you have a conscientious engagement between business and government, where business knows that the treasury and the money in it is of hardworking taxpayers and has to be judiciously used for the larger good. That business recognizes that in the pandemic, the government was not thrifty, but at the same time, the government did not get adventurous by spending blindly and did not have a targeted spend. In fact, the government facilitated liquidity, especially for small businesses and medium-sized businesses. That needs to be recognized. And again, one needs to also recognize, as Hari says and Mr. Bajaj said, that the government is committed to ensuring that public infrastructure is protected, is built on, expanded. But the government has also consistently ensured, I cannot speak for the budget announcements because that would be constitutionally violative of my disposition right now. But I can say that beyond the budget time frame in the forthcoming session of Parliament, the government has already announced that food security for the poorest of the poor will be assured.
Hari Bhartia, add to the list of the to-do list that you want Smriti Irani to take back.
See, on the, I would re-emphasize the one thing that we should continue to work on, and we have discussed this in the past, is about ease of doing business. And this has many aspects to it. You know, India is a democracy. The state and the center may not agree every time. But I think whatever we can execute at the central level, you know, there are many laws which has criminal implications. A lot of that has been corrected, in my view.
Yes.
A lot of effort has been made, finally, in the last 6 or 7 years. So I think this would be the most impactful thing. Anybody you will speak to here, see, people want to write big checks for India. So one thing that has improved is our ability to take big checks, because our projects are bigger, whether it is private sector or public sector. So I think that is a big advantage. But when they want to write a big check, they just want that to make it easier for them to execute. So that's where I would say, I would re-emphasize this one point.
I think that just to possibly reflect or in the statement of Mr. Bhartia, one, and because I've been a part of that process, I must profess that here. Industry highlighted to the government that there are 60,000 compliance issues with regards to industry and the economy, and 66,000 to be precise. 22,000 were already addressed by the government. Recently, the government also introduced its will to legislate on bringing down more of that compliance burden, especially those compliances that have criminal implications on the industry. So insofar as Mr. Bhartia says, the people are ready to write the big checks, we have now the capacity to accept them in a transparent fashion, which means that there is forensic evidence available about the performance capacities of our businesses, which are globally accepted, but also you have a government working in tandem to recognize that when we look at compliances, there are some compliances that necessitates safe workplace for our labor. There are some compliances that necessitate issues like equal pay for equal work. There are some compliances that necessitates unnecessary burden on industry, let's say in packaging or in measurements. And those are the differentiated challenges that the government is applying itself to, but it is doing it in consonance with industry. It's not doing it alienating itself from the industry.
CB.
See, one thing which has really changed in the last few years, and that's a very important change for India, is the trust, the mutual trust between government and industry. Today, I don't see the government hesitating to say that industry is creating wealth, industry is creating livelihood. This was not there earlier, and I think we have heard the highest in India speaking about that very, very convincingly. So that gives a huge space. So a huge ownership on industry when we talk about decriminalization, that industry would also respond in that manner to say that that trust is well earned. I think there's again a partnership approach we need to work on. The second aspect I just wanted to speak on in terms of so there needs to be space both ways, government, industry giving space to each other as the partnership enhances. The second, because you talked about tax, I'm changing tracks. You know, our tax base is really low.
Yeah.
I think one way of it's not just the taxing the rich, but can we expand? Today we have a phenomenal data with the GST,
Yes.
and using that, can we increase the tax base? That's going to be very, very critical. So I'll restrict myself to these two, going forward, which will see a much stronger India.
Well, you wanted to comment on that?
I think that there are two aspects. While CB has spoken about GST and the tax base, one also needs to recognize that there were parts of our industry that were never part of the tax-paying structure. Forget individuals, but industry segments that had never paid tax. Now, what has happened is that you have, after 7 decades, introduced a system where you have necessitated the tax ethic in industry segments that felt, why should I pay tax? And I think the acceptance of that segment of industry, of the tax ethic, also is significant, because many governments before did not want to touch this aspect of the economy, thinking that there will be a political cost to pay, given the expansive workmanship or employee base in those industries. I had the privilege of being Minister Textiles. Textile had such facets. Now, the other aspect, and I'm not meandering towards the budget, because I think it's inappropriate to do so, especially on foreign soil. But I think that apart from the commitment with the industry, what CB touched upon is the fact that government doesn't shy away from appreciation of the industry's capacity to create wealth. For too long in our country, the narrative one heard incessantly was how glorious it is to be poor. And I think that now the government says that you need to aspire to a sustainable life, but you can aspire to better prospects. You need not be reduced to just labor. You can aspire to be an industry leader or an entrepreneur. And I think that that is a tectonic psychological shift when it comes to industry and manufacturing.
I'm going to get wrap-up comments from each one of you in exactly 5 seconds. You walk away feeling optimistic or cautiously optimistic, Sanjiv Bajaj?
Cautiously optimistic because ye dil mange more.
Hari Bhartia, you have to do better than a Pepsi commercial.
No, I'm actually going back much more optimistic than I came in. So, without doubt, because I see a lot of resilience which I didn't expect.
And we're talking global resilience at this point in time, not just India's resilience. Yeah. So that's good news. That's good news. CB.
Opportunity, huge opportunity, sort of an open goal to us. We must score, and there's no choice but to score. And I am confident that the confidence comes from the tremendous support India has got in Davos.
Well, this is the opportunity. This is the moment. Smriti Irani, you walk away feeling what?
I walking into every room, the tentative feeling that I saw across faces of many investors was that the India story now tells global investors, if you don't get in to the play now, Indians will get it done anyway. But to take a leaf of what Sanjiv and the way in which he responded to your question, I will say, as far as India goes, we are telling the world, yahi hai right choice.
Well, on that note, Smriti Irani, Sanjiv Bajaj, Hari Bhartia and Chandrajit Banerjee, many thanks for joining us here on the concluding episode of the CNBC-TV18 Davos Diary. Ye dil mange more, yahi hai right choice. That's the big message here from Davos.
That's the aha message.
That is the aha message. We will be back with more, but for now, from all of us here, goodbye. Thanks for watching.